Stepdaughter demanded I pay for her wedding after years of treating me like trash, so I told her to ask her dead father. So yeah, I've been married to Jill for about 10 years now, but man, the whole stepdad thing didn't exactly go as smoothly as I thought it would when we first got together. I mean, I knew what I was getting into, sort of. Jill had 3 kids from her first marriage: Ryan, Emily, and Sarah. Her ex was kind of a disaster. He was a full-blown addict, barely in their lives, and when he wasn't exactly winning any Dad of the Year awards. I didn't think stepping into their lives would be a walk in the park, but I figured with time I'd bond with all 3 of them. Boy, was I wrong. Ryan and Emily were pretty cool with me from the start. I mean, I didn't expect them to jump into my arms and start calling me dad right away or anything, but we got along well enough. I'd help them with their schoolwork, took them out for ice cream a few times, just normal stuff to build a relationship. We had a decent connection and things were pretty good. But Sarah? Nope. From day one, she made it very clear she wasn't on board with this whole new guy in mom's life situation. She was about 13 when I first met her, and let me tell you, that age, it's brutal. Everything I did annoyed her. If I tried to be nice, she'd roll her eyes or make some sarcastic comment. And if I tried to give her space, she'd make it seem like I was ignoring her on purpose. It was a lose-lose situation from the start. The thing is, I tried. I really did. Jill would talk to her, try to explain that I wasn't there to replace her dad, that I just wanted to be part of the family. But Sarah wasn't having it. She always threw in my face that her dad was the best and that I was just some jerk. It became her favorite line anytime I tried to talk to her. Honestly, I get it. Her dad may not have been a great guy, but he was still her dad, you know? Kids will always put their parents on a pedestal, even if the reality is far from perfect. But still, every time she said it, it cut deep. I wasn't trying to take her dad's place. I just wanted to be someone she could count on. But nope, I was just the jerk, trying to swoop in and ruin her life. I figured things would eventually get better, though. Like, maybe after some time she'd warm up to me, right? I mean, people change, they grow. But things took a hard left when her dad passed away. Now, I wasn't really living with Jill and the kids yet, but I was around a lot. I saw firsthand how Sarah's world pretty much shattered when she got the news. Her dad might have been a mess, but he was still her dad. Losing him hit her like a truck. And whatever dislike she had for me before, it multiplied by 1,000 after that. She didn't just resent me at that point, she actively hated me. It was like she blamed me for everything that had gone wrong in her life. And trust me, it wasn't just some typical teenage angst. She really, really hated me. Jill did her best to help Sarah. She got her into therapy, tried to be there for her as much as possible. But honestly, I don't think it made much of a difference. Sarah would barely talk to me, and when she did, it was nothing but insults or these nasty passive-aggressive comments. She was constantly comparing me to her dad, even though he wasn't exactly a shining example of fatherhood. She'd go on and on about how I was just a wannabe and how her dad would have done everything better. It was exhausting. I remember one night we were all having dinner, and I asked her something simple like, "How was school today?" Just trying to make conversation. She glared at me across the table, took a bite of her food, and just goes, "Why do you care? My real dad wouldn't bother pretending like you do." The whole table went silent. Jill shot her that look, the one moms give when their kids are about to cross a line. But Sarah didn't care. She just kept eating like nothing had happened. I didn't know what to say, so I just sat there, feeling like a complete idiot. How do you even respond to that? Over time, I tried backing off, thinking maybe if I gave her space, she'd come around. But the more I pulled back, the more she acted like I didn't exist. The only time she'd acknowledge me was to remind me that I wasn't her dad. She never missed a chance to make me feel like an outsider in my own family. And let me tell you, it wasn't just affecting me. Ryan and Emily were stuck in the middle of this whole mess. They liked me, and we got along well. But every time Sarah threw one of her tantrums, it would make things awkward for everyone. There were nights where Ryan and Emily would ask to stay over at my place just to get away from all the drama with their sister. I never wanted it to be like this. Then came the big one, Sarah telling Jill she'd run away if we got married. Yeah, that happened. Jill and I had been dating for a couple of years at this point, and things were getting serious. I wanted to move forward, to actually build a life together, but Sarah? She wasn't having it. She told her mom flat out that if we got married, she'd pack her stuff and leave. Jill was torn. She didn't want to lose her daughter, but she also didn't want to keep putting her life on hold because of Sarah's attitude. We talked about it a lot, and eventually we made the decision to hold off on getting married for a while. Maybe Sarah just needed more time to come around. Maybe she'd mellow out as she got older. Spoiler alert, she didn't. But at that moment, we just put everything on pause, hoping things would settle down. In the meantime, Ryan and Emily started spending more and more time at my place. And honestly, we got closer because of it. They didn't want to deal with Sarah's constant outbursts, and I didn't blame them. It wasn't just the typical sibling stuff. She was outright mean to them too, especially after they started warming up to me. It was a rough time for all of us, but somehow we made it work. So after that whole "I'm gonna run away if you get married" thing with Sarah, Jill and I decided to take a step back. We put our wedding plans on hold, thinking maybe with some time, things would calm down. Honestly, I wasn't holding my breath, but I wanted to believe there was a chance Sarah would eventually get over it. Spoiler, she didn't. A couple of years passed, and Jill and I kept doing the whole dating but not married thing. It was frustrating, but we didn't want to push too hard with Sarah still throwing these emotional grenades every time we tried to talk about moving forward. In the meantime, Ryan and Emily were staying at my place more and more. It was becoming their second home, or maybe their first, really. We'd play video games, watch movies, and just hang out. It was a lot more peaceful than being at home where Sarah was constantly on edge. And then, one day, Jill and I sat down and talked. Really talked. Like, what are we doing? Kind of talk. We were tired of putting our life on hold for Sarah. It felt like we'd been dancing around her mood swings for years. Ryan and Emily were already living at my place half the time anyway, and they were pushing us to just get married already. Even Jill was starting to feel like she was walking on eggshells in her own house. So we made a decision. We were going to get married, whether Sarah liked it or not. I remember that conversation with Jill so clearly. We were sitting on the couch, and she was just exhausted. "I love my daughter," she said, "but I can't keep living like this. She's holding our entire family hostage with her anger." She wasn't wrong, and I was done trying to tiptoe around Sarah's feelings, especially when she didn't care about anyone else's. So we set a date. We didn't make a big deal out of it. Didn't throw some huge engagement party or anything like that. We just quietly told the kids that we were getting married. Ryan and Emily were thrilled. They were old enough to understand that Sarah's behavior wasn't normal, and they were actually excited to see their mom happy again. But Sarah? When she found out, it was like World War III erupted in our house. She went ballistic. I'm not even exaggerating. The minute Jill told her, she started screaming about how we were betraying her dad, how we were trying to erase him and replace him with me. And yeah, she threw the usual insults at me, calling me a jerk, telling me I'd never be her dad. But this time, it was worse. This time, she took it out on Ryan and Emily, too. I'll never forget the day she destroyed Ryan's room. Jill had just told her about the wedding, and a few hours later, I hear this crash from upstairs. I run up there, and Sarah's in Ryan's room, throwing stuff around like a tornado. She knocked over his gaming console, ripped posters off the wall, and even smashed a picture frame that had a photo of me, Ryan, and Emily from one of our camping trips. All because she thought her siblings were betraying their dad by being happy for us. Ryan was devastated. He came home and found his room trashed, and all he could do was stand there, staring at the mess. He didn't say anything, but I could see it in his face. He was done with Sarah. He'd tried to be understanding, tried to be patient, but this was too far. I helped him clean up, but the damage was done. That night, he and Emily both came to me and said they wanted to move in with me full time. They were tired of the constant drama with Sarah. They didn't want to feel guilty for being happy or for having a relationship with me. Jill was heartbroken, but she understood. She knew Sarah was pushing everyone away, and she couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. So, Ryan and Emily officially moved in with me, and it was like a weight was lifted off their shoulders. They didn't have to deal with Sarah's outbursts every day, and we finally started to feel like a real family. Of course, Sarah wasn't done with her antics. After Ryan and Emily moved out, she became even more distant. She barely spoke to her mom and almost never came around when I was home. Jill tried to keep the peace, but Sarah was like a ticking time bomb, always ready to explode at the slightest mention of me. One day, she flat out told Jill, "If you marry him, I'll never come back here." I overheard that, and honestly, I didn't even feel angry anymore. I just felt tired. Tired of the constant drama, tired of the insults, tired of trying to make a relationship work with someone who clearly didn't want one. We went ahead with the wedding plans, small ceremony, just family and close friends. Ryan and Emily were both excited and even helped us pick out a venue. Jill kept hoping Sarah would come around, maybe even show up to the wedding. I knew better. Sarah was stubborn, and once she decided she hated someone, that was it. There was no changing her mind. The day of the wedding came, and sure enough, Sarah didn't show up. Jill was upset, but she didn't let it ruin the day. It was actually a beautiful ceremony. Simple, nothing fancy, but it felt right. It was the first time in a long time that I felt like we could move forward without the constant cloud of Sarah's anger hanging over us. But as much as I tried to just focus on the good, I couldn't shake the feeling that things were only going to get worse with Sarah. I mean, how do you come back from something like this? She hadn't just refused to come to the wedding, she'd cut herself off from the entire family. Ryan and Emily barely spoke to her anymore, and Jill was at her wits' end, not knowing how to fix things. A few days after the wedding, I got a text from Sarah. It was short and to the point. "You ruined everything. I hope you're happy." And that was it. No explanation, no follow-up, just pure, unfiltered bitterness. I didn't respond. What could I even say at this point? Ryan and Emily tried reaching out to her a few times, but every time they did, she'd throw some snide comment about how they'd sold out by accepting me into their lives. Eventually, they stopped trying. There's only so many times you can be told you're a traitor before you just stop caring. So, that's where we were. Jill and I were finally married, Ryan and Emily were living with us full-time, and Sarah? Well, Sarah was pretty much gone, at least emotionally. She had her own life now, and we weren't a part of it. But little did I know, this was just the beginning of the real drama with Sarah. Because while we thought things had settled down after the wedding, Sarah wasn't done with us yet. Not by a long shot. So, after the wedding, things with Sarah got even worse, if that was even possible. Like I mentioned before, she didn't come to the ceremony, and while Jill was heartbroken about that, we both tried to move forward. I mean, we were married now, and Ryan and Emily were fully on board living with us, and honestly, life was good in a lot of ways. But Sarah? She went full radio silence. At first, I thought maybe she just needed time to cool off. I figured she'd be mad for a while, but eventually she'd come around. I didn't expect her to suddenly want a relationship with me, but at least talk to her mom, right? But weeks went by and she didn't say a word to Jill. Not even a simple congratulations or anything. It was like we didn't exist. Jill was torn up about it. She tried calling, texting, even showing up at Sarah's place, but Sarah wouldn't answer the door. It was painful to watch Jill go through that, knowing there wasn't really anything I could do to fix it. Sarah had made her choice, and she wasn't interested in being part of our lives anymore. Ryan and Emily weren't surprised. In fact, they were kind of over it at that point. Sarah's behavior had been so toxic for so long that they just stopped caring. I mean, don't get me wrong, they still loved their sister, but they weren't going to keep reaching out if all she did was throw their support for me in their faces. It was exhausting for everyone. Then out of nowhere, about 6 months after the wedding, Sarah reaches out to me. Not Jill, me. I'll be honest, I was shocked. I hadn't heard from her directly in what felt like forever. So when I saw her name pop up on my phone, I was like, what now? I wasn't exactly expecting a friendly chat. So I opened the text and guess what? She's not texting to make amends. Nope. She's asking me if I'm going to pay for her wedding. Let that sink in for a second. This is the same girl who spent years telling me I'm a jerk, that I'm not her dad, and that her real dad was some kind of superhero. The same girl who trashed Ryan's room because he dared to accept me as his stepdad. And now, after completely ghosting us for months, she suddenly wants me to pay for her wedding? I couldn't believe it. I didn't respond right away. I mean, how do you even answer that? I showed Jill the text, and she just kind of sighed. She knew what Sarah was like, but this was something else. Jill didn't tell me what to do. She left it up to me, but I could tell she wasn't exactly thrilled with the idea of me paying for Sarah's wedding. After thinking it over for a bit, I decided to call Sarah. Texting felt too impersonal, and I didn't want to get into a back and forth over messages, so I dialed her number, not really sure what I was going to say, but knowing I had to say something. She answered, and right away I could tell she wasn't calling to chat. Her voice was sharp, like she was annoyed that I'd called instead of just saying yes to her text. She didn't even bother with small talk, just went straight into how she was getting married, how her dad would have paid for everything if he were still alive, and how it was only fair that I cover the costs since I paid for Ryan and Emily's weddings. I let her finish, just kind of sitting there, stunned by how blunt she was being, and when she was done, I took a deep breath and told her no, I wasn't going to pay for her wedding. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then she just exploded. "What do you mean, no?" she snapped. "You paid for my siblings, but not me? That's not fair. You're supposed to be part of this family." That part stung a little. Here she was, accusing me of not being part of the family when she's the one who's pushed me away for years. But I kept my cool and told her, "Sarah, I paid for Ryan and Emily's weddings because they wanted me to. They've accepted me as their stepdad, and we have a relationship. You've made it pretty clear you don't want me in your life. So why would I pay for your wedding? She didn't like that answer at all. She started yelling, calling me all sorts of names, telling me I was selfish, that I was trying to punish her, that I'd never be half the man her dad was. I've heard all of it before, but it still hit hard. I've tried for years to be there for her, and all I ever get in return is hate. At this point, I was done. I told her, "Look, Sarah, I'm sorry, but I'm not paying for your wedding. You've spent years telling me I'm nothing to you. You don't get to come out of nowhere and ask me for something like this. It doesn't work that way." And then, that's when I said it. I probably shouldn't have, but I was just so fed up. I said, "If you want your wedding paid for, why don't you ask your real dad?" There was silence on the other end of the line. Dead silence. And then she hung up. I stood there, staring at my phone, feeling this mix of guilt and relief. I knew I'd gone too far. I knew mentioning her dad like that was a low blow, but at the same time, I was just done. Done trying to please someone who clearly didn't want anything to do with me unless it involved money. Done being the bad guy in a story I never asked to be a part of. I told Jill what happened, and she didn't say much. She just nodded like she understood, but I could tell she was worried. Worried about what this meant for her relationship with Sarah. Worried that things would never get better. And maybe they wouldn't. Maybe that was just the way things were now. After that, I didn't hear from Sarah again for a long time. She didn't reach out, didn't try to fix things, and honestly, I didn't either. I figured we'd both said all we needed to say. I'd crossed a line, sure, but I wasn't about to apologize for finally standing up for myself after years of being treated like garbage. Still, it weighed on me. I wasn't proud of what I said, but I also knew it had to be said. I wasn't going to let her keep using me as her emotional punching bag. Not anymore. So, yeah, that's how the whole wedding payment thing went down. It wasn't pretty, and it definitely didn't end the way I'd hoped, but at least I said what I needed to say. Maybe now she'd finally realize that you can't just treat people like crap and expect them to give you whatever you want. But who knows? With Sarah, it's always something. So, after the whole wedding payment blow up with Sarah, things went quiet for a while. And by quiet, I mean dead silent. I didn't hear from her, and honestly, I wasn't expecting to. Jill was still trying to process the whole situation, but she didn't push me to reach out or apologize. She understood that what I said, while harsh, had been building up for years. I mean, anyone would have snapped at that point, right? Anyway, life went on. Ryan and Emily were living with us, and it was good. Peaceful, no drama. I think they were both relieved that Sarah wasn't around to stir things up anymore. We'd talk about her from time to time, but not much. It's like everyone just decided that this was the way it was going to be, and we all moved on. But of course, that peace didn't last. It was probably about 2 or 3 months after the whole "ask your real dad" incident that I got a call from Ryan. He was out with some friends, and guess who he ran into? Sarah. Apparently, she'd been avoiding all of us, but she'd been keeping in touch with a few of her old friends from high school, and one of them was part of Ryan's group. Awkward, right? Ryan said the whole thing was weird. Sarah didn't talk to him much, but she did make a point of letting everyone know how terrible I was for refusing to pay for her wedding. Like, she was still angry about it, but what made it worse was that she started twisting the story to make me look even worse than I already did. According to her, I didn't just refuse to pay, I laughed in her face and told her she didn't deserve a wedding at all. Ryan knew that was BS. He was mad for a while, but not at her. More like mad at the situation. He told me he wasn't even surprised that she'd try to play the victim card in front of her friends. He said she was acting all hurt and betrayed, like I had personally destroyed her dream wedding or something. Classic Sarah move, right? Play the victim, shift the blame, make it all about her. That night, Ryan came home and filled me and Jill in on what happened. Jill didn't say much, just listened. I could tell she was hurt by what Sarah was doing, but again, she wasn't surprised. At this point, none of us were. But then, things took a turn I wasn't really expecting. A few days after Ryan's run-in with Sarah, I get a call from a number I don't recognize. I normally don't answer unknown numbers, but something told me I should pick up. So, I do. And it's Sarah. Now I haven't spoken to Sarah since that whole wedding argument, so I wasn't exactly sure how this was going to go. At first I thought maybe she was calling to apologize or at least try to patch things up. But no, it was nothing like that. The second I answered, she went right into it. "You really think you can just say whatever you want to me and get away with it?" She snapped. I was caught off guard, obviously. I tried to stay calm and asked her what she was talking about, and that's when she unloaded. She started accusing me of turning Ryan and Emily against her, saying that I was the reason the family was falling apart. She even blamed me for her mom and her not talking much anymore. Apparently, I was responsible for all of it. I couldn't even get a word in. She just kept going, saying how I've ruined everything, how I've always tried to replace her dad, and how she can't believe her mom chose to marry someone like me. It was like years of pent-up resentment were coming out all at once. And the worst part? She honestly believed every word she was saying. When she finally stopped, I tried to explain that I wasn't trying to replace her dad, that I never wanted to come between her and her mom or her siblings. But she didn't care. She wasn't listening. In her mind, I was the villain, and nothing I said was going to change that. So I just told her, "Look, Sarah, I'm sorry things turned out this way, but you've made it clear you don't want me in your life. I'm not going to keep fighting with you about this. If you ever want to talk, I'm here, but I'm done with this back and forth." And then she said something that stuck with me. She said, "You've never been part of this family, and you never will be. You're just some guy my mom married." That one hurt. I mean, after everything I'd been through with her siblings, after years of trying to be there for her, she still saw me as nothing, just some guy. But I wasn't about to let her see that it bothered me. So I just said, "Okay, if that's how you feel, I get it." And then she hung up. I sat there for a while, just kind of processing everything. I wasn't surprised by her reaction, but it still hurt. I mean, who wouldn't feel hurt by that? I've been in her life for over a decade, and to her, I'm still just some guy. But I guess that's how it was always going to be. Later that night, I told Jill about the conversation. She didn't seem surprised either. She just nodded and said, "She's angry. She needs someone to blame." Yeah, that was probably true, but it didn't make it any easier to deal with. At this point, I didn't know what else to do. I'd done everything I could to try to make things work with Sarah, but it was clear that no matter what I did, it was never going to be enough. And honestly, I was tired. Tired of being the punching bag. Tired of always being the bad guy in her story. It was exhausting, and I didn't have the energy to keep fighting a battle I was never going to win. So after that, I made a decision. I was done. Done trying to fix things with Sarah. Done trying to be the dad she clearly didn't want. I was going to focus on the people who actually wanted me in their lives. Ryan, Emily, and Jill. If Sarah ever wanted to come around, I'd be here. But until then, I was done putting myself through the emotional ringer for someone who didn't want me there. I didn't hear from Sarah again for a while after that, and I didn't go out of my way to reach out either. I figured if she wanted to talk, she knew how to find me. But I wasn't going to keep chasing after a relationship that was never really there in the first place. It's a weird feeling giving up on someone, but sometimes you just have to accept that you can't fix everything. And that's what I did. After that last call with Sarah, where she told me I was just some guy her mom married, I thought that was the end of it. I'd come to terms with the fact that Sarah was never going to see me as part of her family. And honestly, I was okay with that. Well, not okay in the sense that it didn't bother me, but I was done putting in the effort to try and fix something that wasn't fixable. Life carried on. Jill, Ryan, Emily, and I found our groove, and things were calm, which was nice for a change. Sarah hadn't spoken to any of us in months, and while I know that hurt Jill, she didn't push it. I think she was starting to realize, like I did, that maybe Sarah needed time, or maybe she'd never come around. Either way, we couldn't keep putting our lives on pause for her anymore. But just when I thought things had settled down, Sarah came back into the picture. Again, not in a good way. It was a Saturday afternoon. I remember because we'd been having a lazy day, just hanging out at home, and then the doorbell rang. Jill got up to answer it, and I could hear voices at the door, but nothing too alarming. Then Jill walked into the living room, and she had this look on her face, like she didn't know whether to be angry or upset. "Sarah's here," she said. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I figured maybe Sarah had decided to come over and finally talk. Maybe after all this time, she wanted to try and mend things, or at least have a conversation that didn't involve her yelling at me. I got up and went to the door, trying to prepare myself for whatever was about to happen. But the minute I saw her standing there, I knew this wasn't going to be a friendly visit. Sarah didn't look like she was here to talk. She looked angry, really angry. "I'm here to get what's mine," she said. No greeting, no small talk, nothing. Just straight to the point. I was confused. "What do you mean, what's yours?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. She crossed her arms and glared at me. "Ryan and Emily told me you paid for their weddings. That's not fair. You owe me the same." There it was again. The same argument she'd been making for months. But this time she wasn't asking over the phone or through text. She was standing in my doorway, demanding it like she was entitled to it. I took a deep breath and tried to explain, again, why I wasn't going to pay for her wedding. "Sarah, I've told you before. I paid for Ryan and Emily because we have a relationship. They've been a part of my life for years. But you've made it pretty clear you don't want anything to do with me. So why would I pay for your wedding? I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd understand that. But no, she didn't. She stepped closer, practically in my face, and said, "You think you can just walk into my family and decide who gets what? You're not my dad. You never have been. But if you're going to pretend to be, then you better treat all of us the same." Now, I'm not going to lie. That hit a nerve. I was tired. Tired of being treated like I was the bad guy for not giving in to her demands. Tired of her acting like I owed her something when all she's ever done is make me feel like I'm not welcome in her life. So I said, "Sarah, you're right. I'm not your dad, and I never tried to be. But I've done my best to be there for your mom and your siblings, and I'm not going to apologize for that. You don't get to pick and choose when I'm part of the family just because you want something from me." She stared at me for a moment, like she was trying to figure out what to say next. Then she laughed. Not the kind of laugh where something's funny, but the kind where someone's so mad they don't know what else to do. "You're unbelievable," she said, shaking her head. "You think you're this great guy, but all you've done is ruin everything. My mom chose you over me, and now you're acting like you're the victim." At this point, I was done. There was no reasoning with her, no having a rational conversation. She wasn't here to talk. She was here to get what she wanted, and when she realized she wasn't going to get it, she just turned it into another opportunity to tear me down. "I'm not doing this with you, Sarah," I said, stepping back. "If you can't talk to me without throwing insults, then there's nothing more to say." She opened her mouth to say something else, but Jill stepped in. "Sarah, I think it's time for you to go," she said, her voice calm but firm. Sarah glared at her. "Really, Mom? You're going to let him talk to me like that?" Jill didn't flinch. "This isn't about him, Sarah. This is about you coming here demanding something you know isn't fair and expecting everyone to just give in because you're angry. You need to leave." For a second, I thought Sarah might actually listen, but instead, she shook her head, gave us both one last disgusted look, and walked out the door without another word. After she left, Jill and I just stood there in silence for a while. I could tell she was upset, but she didn't say anything. Finally, she just sighed and said, "I don't know what to do anymore." Neither did I. I mean, what could we do? Sarah had made it clear that she wasn't interested in anything other than getting what she thought she was owed. And no matter how many times we tried to explain our side, it didn't matter. She didn't want to hear it. After that, things went quiet again. Sarah didn't reach out, and we didn't either. I think we both needed time to process what had happened. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the fact that Sarah had no intention of ever seeing me as part of her life, no matter what I did. And at this point, I had to accept that.